A young boy of 16 years wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished another long day at the local market. The sun had begun to set, casting a warm orange glow over the crowded streets. Vendors were packing up their goods, and the sounds of evening prayers floated through the air. He slung his bag over his shoulder and made his way through the throngs of people, his mind already on the next task at hand. At home, Emily and Chi-Chi were waiting for him. Welcome to Afro Tales TV, your home for rich, exciting, and inspiring stories from around the world. Today's story will touch your heart and keep you hooked till the very end. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our amazing stories. How it all began. In a small community in Lagos, life was defined by a blend of traditional values and modern struggles. The community was vibrant with bustling markets, colorful festivals, and the warmth of neighbors who often felt more like extended family. Yet beneath this lively surface lay the harsh realities of hunger, lack, and a seemingly bleak future faced by many families.
In this community lived Edward and his two younger sisters, Emily and Chi-Chi. Their mother, Felicia, a kind and hardworking woman, had always ensured her children were well cared for despite the challenges. She was a woman who tries not to depend on anyone, and because of this, she became a strong support to Joe, her husband, and a pillar for her children. She had formed a strong bond with another woman in the neighborhood called Monica.
They often help each other out when it comes to running market errands or looking after their kids, sharing their resources and any business opportunity that presents itself. This bond spread over to their husbands and children, and if you are not told, you would mistake them for one big family. The only difference was that Monica's husband, Mr. Madhu, was working in a big company and was well paid, while Joe was a struggling businessman whose business was dwindling every day, but no one could really tell, because Felicia was a hard-working woman who filled the gap. Well, until she fell ill suddenly and couldn't respond to treatment. When Edward's mother fell gravely ill, Monica and her husband stood by their side, offering support. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, she passed away, leaving her children in the care of her husband and Monica. Mr. Andrew had struggled to take care of the children after the demise of his wife, but he realized just how much his wife was doing to make the home run so smoothly, almost perfectly. He felt guilty for not appreciating her better and doing more to help her. He had felt it was a simple thing to take care of the home until now that he had no help, despite the fact that Monica always comes by during the weekends to help them make soups and stews and other food preps that they would need for the week. She also does all their market runs for them. But 3 years after the death of Felicia, Joe became friends with a food seller in his place of business, and after some weeks decided he loved her too much and would prefer to live with her and her 4 children. When the woman agreed to his plans, Joe abandoned his children and home entirely. His children had refused to believe that their dad abandoned them because he left a note apologizing for his actions. But they still went to his shop and other places where he could possibly be, but he was not in any of those places. His business had completely shut down and he didn't tell anyone around there. But they had kept hope alive, Monica and Madhu making sure they lacked nothing. It was after a few weeks when Edward received a call from their dad, telling him and his new family had relocated to a neighboring country. Then Edward knew for a fact that they had been abandoned. Edward felt too lost and confused to be angry, but when the anger did set in, he remembered his mother, and the memories of her helped him to think straight, and instead of acting out that anger, he decided instead to make his mama proud because she left a good footprint for him to follow. So he wrote his dad off in his heart and faced his sisters. This left Edward with no choice but to drop out of school to ensure his sisters never did. Just 15 years at this time, Edward had to take on the role of both father and mother to his sisters. The burden was heavy and the shock palpable, but his love for Emily and Chi-Chi was unwavering. He did every legitimate work under the sun he could find, from busboy to sewage cleaner. No job was too dirty or hard as long as it paid his bills. He shut himself off from the world, developed a thick skin to mockery and shame, making his entire life and focus all about his sisters. As long as they were happy and healthy, then all was all right with the world. Meanwhile, Mrs. Monica's help became less frequent. She started to distance her children, Ugo and Lily, from Edward and his sisters. Ugo and Lily, who were once close friends with Edward and his siblings, missed their companions deeply and often begged their mother to let them visit. This her new attitude was formed when Edward made the decision to move into a one-bedroom apartment from their three-bedroom apartment because he couldn't afford the rent anymore, and he doesn't want to overburden Mrs. Monica and her family, who had been of immense help to him and his sisters. They were part of the reason he didn't run mad from the shock of it all, but he knew even as young as he was that there is limit to which anyone can bear your burden, and he didn't want to stretch them to that limit. So he had gone to tell them of his decision, even though Mr. Madhu had offered to help with half of the rent. Edward had insisted, so Mr. Madhu had offered to give him the rent money for 2 years' worth of the one-bedroom apartment. Edward had accepted the money only when Mr. Madhu agreed that it was a loan payable whenever he is ready. Edward knew the free money would have gone a long way in easing things out for him and his sisters, but he just couldn't accept it. If he wanted to be a man, he might as well start early. The landlord of their former house had graciously refunded the remaining balance, even adding a little on it when he heard their story. Some of their neighbors had given them foodstuff and other things as they were moving out. It was a day of tears and much sorrow in their street, but Edward refused to see himself as a pity case because he knew this was just another beginning. He wasn't God to say what the future holds, but he will give his best and leave the rest to his Maker. When they had moved away to another community not far but quite different from where they had grown up, Mrs. Monica had began to distance herself and her family from them without showing it much, because she still helps them out with food and her children's old clothes once in a while, because her first son Ugo was the same age as Edward, while her daughter Lily was the same age as Chichi. It became worse when she found out what kind jobs Edward did to put food on the table, because they still visit once in a while on the weekends, because Chichi and Emily will always disturb that they want to see Lily, being that they no longer attend the same schools, and Edwards will always take that as an opportunity to take Ugo's old books, which he reads whenever he can. It was always an eventful day for the children, they being oblivious to everything, except that they could eat well-prepared and garnished food, play with their friend and her amazing toys, but Edward always sensed something was off, but couldn't really put his finger to what it was, so he always ignored the feeling whenever it cropped up. Until one Saturday evening, Edward, who had escorted Ugo to get something from a nearby store, came back and told his sisters to get ready so they can go back home. He went to inform Mrs. Monica, who was at the backyard, but as he approached, he couldn't help but hear her telling someone that she was tired of him and his sister's burdensome presence. She had better plans for her kids, and she doesn't want them being set back by children who obviously carried unfortunate destinies. When the person she was speaking to replied, Edward realized she was on the phone, and she had kept it on loudspeaker. The woman on the other end laughed but said she shouldn't say such things, as the children had no power to stop their mother from dying or their father from running away. But that is why I said they are people with unfortunate destinies, Mrs. Monica exclaimed exasperatedly. The shock kept Edward rooted to the spot. He didn't know if he should go forward or turn backward. The searing pain that went through his heart was beyond understanding. Mrs. Monica he held in high regards. He regarded her as he did his late mother, and she could feel this way about them. He wiped the tears he suddenly realized were on his face, coming to a decision. He went forward and informed Mrs. Monica they were leaving, but tried his best not to show the pain and anger that was warring for space in his heart right now. But Mrs. Monica, flustered by Edward's sudden presence, still noticed something was off about his approach, but she attributed to her fear that he might have overheard her conversation a few seconds earlier. She followed him inside and gave him the bag she had packed for them, but Edward graciously rejected it and told her they had enough foodstuff at home. All attempts to make him collect the bag failed. Even the money Mr. Madhu usually give to them he rejected. His sisters couldn't understand his attitude, because they know they needed that money and food to help them during the week. But they trusted their brother enough not to question his actions, because he had shown them in more ways than one that he wasn't something who acted on a whim or without a good reason. so they had affirmed all he said. Mr. Madhu had found it disturbing because he knows something had prompted that strange attitude, but he couldn't say what it was. But for the now, he will let the young man have his way. When they come the next weekend, he will find out what the real reason was. Ugo and Lily had escorted their friends as usual, feeling as though something had changed in the air around Edward, but even they couldn't get him to say what it was. But Lily knew because she had seen Edward and also overheard her mother's conversation. She had felt such anger but didn't know what to do about it, so she had pretended like she didn't know. That weekend was the last time Edward crossed the doorsteps of the Madhu family until years later. But this did not stop the friendship of the sisters, neither did it make Edward hate his friend Ugo. Rather, it gave him an hunger to change the narrative. Edward's determination was doubled, and he poured his life into making everyone that believes them unfortunate to eat their words. Chapter 2. The years passed in a blur of hard work and determination. Edward's routine remained the same. Wake up early, go to work, come home and take care of his sisters. His sacrifices were immense, but seeing Emily thrive in university and Chi-Chi excel in secondary school made every hardship worthwhile. Emily, now in her second year at the University of Lagos, was studying medicine, a dream she had held since she was a little girl. Her passion and dedication were a direct reflection of Edward's influence and support. She often called him her hero, though he always brushed off the compliment with a modest smile. Chi-Chi, the youngest, had just completed her secondary school education with outstanding results. She had a natural talent for the arts and dreamt of becoming an architect, and was already making preparation for her admission into the university. Her sketches and designs adorned the walls of their home, each one a testament to her creativity and ambition. Ugo, who had always remained a steadfast friend despite his mother's attempts to distance him, had graduated from university and was now pursuing a master's degree. He often visited Edward, offering encouragement and support. Lily, too, had finished secondary school and was also preparing for her university entrance exams, maintaining a close bond with Chi-Chi and Emily. Edward, despite his grueling schedule, had managed to sit for his general certificate examinations. He aced all his papers, a remarkable feat considering the circumstances. However, he knew he couldn't pursue further education with the endless bills piling up. He wasn't really sad at this as his thoughts drifted to the future. He dreamed of a day when his sacrifices would pay off, when his sisters would be settled in their chosen careers and he can finally pursue his own dreams. But for now, his focus remained unwavering. His life was dedicated to his sisters, and their happiness was his greatest reward. Even though things are not where he desired, they were not where they used to be. He had learned paint production and how to paint as well, though he doesn't have his own factory yet, but he has started producing his own brand, and they were selling gradually as people keep recommending his product. He had bought a flat from someone who was selling off his properties to relocate to another country with his family. Though the move had emptied his account, but he was glad he made that decision. For now, he knew he never had to worry about his sisters having a roof over their heads again. They didn't move in immediately, but when they did, he had made sure the house had the basic things young ladies needed. The joy in their eyes and their laughter had made it a worthwhile sacrifice. It didn't matter if he needed to work twice as hard to recover, he was just glad he had what it takes to put such laughter in their mouths again. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Edward sat down with a cup of tea, savoring a rare moment of peace. The house was quiet. Emily on a school break was at a study group, and Chi-Chi was out with Lily. He closed his eyes and let out a deep sigh, allowing the tranquility to wash over him. In these quiet moments, he found the strength to continue, knowing that as long as his sisters were happy and healthy, everything would be all right. In that little time of peace and quiet, his mind drifted back to when things were so difficult that he wondered how they will ever survive. The weight of responsibility had been a constant pressure, threatening to overwhelm him. There were nights he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how he managed to keep going. The stress often felt insurmountable, and he marveled at how his head hadn't exploded from the sheer intensity of it all. But no matter how bad it got somehow, there was always wisdom to navigate. There was always a reprieve to ease the pressure a little. There was a time he was so low on cash and there were too many important things to sort out. It was a particularly harsh period for Edward, one that tested his resolve like never before. His financial burdens had reached a breaking point, and he found himself struggling to keep everything afloat. Emily was about to write her final exams, but her school and exam fees remained unpaid, and the deadline loomed ominously. Despite the patience and leniency shown by the school owner, Edward knew that he had to settle the fees before the exams began, if his sister will participate in that exam. Adding to his woes, Chi-Chi's school fees were also overdue by 2 terms, and their landlord had issued a final warning: pay the rent within 2 weeks or face eviction. The cupboards were bare, not a single morsel of food in the house. The weight of these responsibilities pressed down on Edward, making it difficult to breathe. One night, overwhelmed by the crushing stress and feeling suffocated within the walls of their small home, Edward could no longer bear it. He ran out of the house, the cool night air hitting his face as he ran aimlessly through the quiet streets. The neighborhood, usually bustling with activity during the day, was now eerily silent, save for the distant sounds of barking dogs and the occasional car passing by. But Edward was oblivious to it all. As he wandered the streets not knowing where he was going, he found himself at a small clearing. He sank onto the ground, his head in his hands, trying to steady his breathing. The enormity of his responsibilities threatening to crush him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt utterly helpless. His thoughts spiraled, and he questioned whether he could continue to shoulder this immense burden. He had always been strong, but now he felt as if he were on the brink of collapse. Tears he had long held back began to flow freely, and he let them. In that vulnerable moment, alone in the darkness, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his struggles. Yet, even in his despair, a small voice within him whispered words of encouragement. It felt as though for the briefest moment he felt a hand on his shoulders. The thought of Emily and Chi-Chi drifted into his mind like a cool breeze, their bright futures, and the dreams they held dear. These helped to calm him down. His love for his sisters rekindled the fire of determination within him. Wiping away his tears, he took a deep breath and made a silent vow to find a way through this. As he made to stand, he heard a shuffling sound behind him. He stood up immediately and looked back frightened, realizing now how quiet and lonely everywhere was. He saw 2 figures standing a little distant from where he was hidden in the shadows. He wanted to run, but something prompted him to ask what they wanted from him. To his shock, he saw his sisters as they stepped out of the shadows, looking at him more frightened than he was. He was speechless for a few seconds. When he recovered from the shock, he went to them asking angrily why they followed him. Chi-Chi hugged him then and began to cry. He had no choice than to calm himself and gently unclasped her arms from around him, bending down to look at their faces. "Don't cry, please. Let's go home. We can talk when we are safely inside." He held their hands and they quickly walked back home, fear gripping their hearts as they walked along the dark, lonely road. He didn't realize he had wandered that far from home, Edward thought absently, as he kept a sharp eye out for any danger. They all sighed in relief when they were safely behind their locked door. He then asked them again why they followed him. He thought they were asleep when he left the house. By this time, Chi-Chi was no longer crying, and Emily was looking at him with what he could only interpret as anger. He was flabbergasted, if not for how serious the matter was. He would laughed at the whole scenario, but there was really nothing funny about tonight's escapade. He looked at Emily and said, "Why are you glaring at me like that? I am the one that is supposed to be angry right now, so madam, explain to me why you are angry." Chi-Chi looked at her elder siblings and started crying again. She had never seen her big brother that angry before, no matter how bad they were. He was always patient and loving. So she was confused as to why he was so angry just because they followed him, unless what Emily had said was true, and her crying got louder. Edward turned and slapped her across the cheek, shouting at her to keep quiet. The shock shut her up immediately. Never in her entire life has he ever raised his voice, much less his hand on her. But before she could recover, Emily has stood up and stood in her front, blocking her from Edward's view. Emily was visibly shaking now, but she replied Edward in a very calm voice that was the very opposite of her feelings at that moment. If you want to leave too, you can do that without being violent, just like Dad did. You can do the same. At least he didn't hit us. I am sorry we followed you and spoilt your plans. It was not Chi-Chi's fault though. I was the one who woke her up. But now you can go. We will no longer follow you. Mom died. We survived. Dad left, we lived. And when you leave, we will survive too. So you better leave. The earlier, the better. She finished speaking, turned away from him, took Chi-Chi's hand and led her to the worn mattress. For Edward, to say he was shocked was an understatement. He didn't understand one word. That left his sister's mouth right now. What does she mean? He should leave like their dad. What has going out to get fresh air got to do with running away like a coward? Granted, it was a bit too late in the night for a stroll, but... He shook his head to clear the cobwebs and went to where they lay with their backs turned on him. He laid his hand gently on Emily's back and discovered she was trembling. He quickly turned her towards him, panicking, and realized she was crying so bad with her hand on her mouth to muffle the sound. He lifted her from the mattress, ignoring her struggles, and hugged her tight, his heart breaking to pieces at the realization of what she meant. Chi-Chi also got up and came to him then. He released one arm and gathered her into his embrace as well. His control slipped and he broke down. It was the first time he cried before his sisters, feeling so overwhelmed and unhinged. The moment they realized he was crying too, they immediately began to console and apologize to him. They had never seen him in this state before, so they were both scared and sorry that they may have been the reason behind his pain. They had seen him stop at the clearing, but they only thought he was resting, and they had also stopped, not wanting to alert him to their presence, but had only gone closer when he wanted to get up, so they won't lose sight of him. So seeing him cry now was a new thing for them. When he pulled himself together, he had gathered them again on both sides of him and apologized for frightening them, both now and earlier. When everyone had recovered, he gently probed that they explain why they followed him out so late at night, even though he was pretty sure he knew the reason now, but he needed to hear it from them, so there would be no shadow of doubt, for he wasn't someone who acted on mere suspicion. If he wanted to take action on a matter, he makes sure he has his facts straight. To avoid had I known. Won't anyone tell me? He prompted, gently rubbing their backs as they lay on his chest. Chi-Chi sat up and, looking down at her hands, said, Emily woke me up and said, you were running away like Daddy and we should follow you. So we left the house and followed you. His heart sank, the pain hitting him afresh, but he kept himself in check this time. He gently raised Emily's face and asked her if it was true. She nodded as tears slid down her cheeks. Please stop crying. You have cried enough. I don't want you getting sick just when your exams are around the corner, Edward pleaded, hugging her to himself while Chi-Chi held his hand, looking on. When the tears subsided, Emily raised her head and explained, I was just about to fall asleep when I heard you stand up suddenly and ran out the door. The only thing I could think at that moment was that you were abandoning us as Daddy did, and I wasn't about to let that happen. So I woke Chi-Chi up and we followed you. She concluded, looking down at her hands, feeling agitated again, but she didn't want to cry anymore. Edward cleared his throat and said in a clear but gentle voice, I want the both of you to listen to what I'm about to say now and don't ever forget it. Are you listening? They both nodded, their hearts skipping. I will never under any circumstances abandon you both. Not while there is breath left in my body. You both are my world, the circumference of my existence. So how can I possibly survive outside of your orbit? He said the last part in a lighter note, thinking to lighten the mood, but his sisters were not in a mood to laugh. He continued, seizing the opportunity to address a matter that has been at the back of his mind. Don't ever entertain such thoughts again. I only needed fresh air, even though it was late, but I didn't know that I wandered so far. That was what happened. He paused, causing them to look up at him. I wasn't running away, okay? He said, looking at them. They nodded, such relief washing over the both of them. They hugged him, their minds settling down, but Edward was not done speaking. Even if there is ever such a situation or time you can't reach me for whatever reason, it will never be because I choose to abandon you, okay? Please, I am begging you. I am not Dad, and it is not every guy out there that is like Dad. You see Lily's dad, right? Is he anything like Dad? They shook their heads. What of Stephanie's dad? He asked, mentioning their neighbor. They shook their heads again. He went on to cite examples of all the men they knew who were with their family doing a wonderful job as dads, even mentioning those that were in the same situation they were when their mom died. At the end, it was a meaningful night for them all, because they were able to forge a stronger bond and allay fears that had been hidden in their minds, which would have become bigger monsters in the future. They went to bed when it was almost dawn, but they went to sleep satisfied and happy. Edward hadn't found a way to sort out the problems that had sent him running, but he was sure they will survive. As long as they had each other, no problem was unsurmountable.